in 2013, I was sitting on my porch that overlooked the Salt Lake Valley with a couple of friends of mine, and we saw objects that were not behaving like aircraft or any conventional objects. And we watched it, and then we watched two of them, and it was a very unusual experience. And so for me, back in 2013, even though I had had a lifelong interest, that really, to me, said, okay, what are you going to do about it? Because here you have something that is in the flight corridor for the Salt Lake International Airport. It is 80 miles away from Dugway Proving Ground. If this is, just identify it, learn what it is. If this is a threat, then we can figure that out.
In the studio tonight, UFO Classified host Erica Lukes joins me. The U.S. government acknowledged this week the existence of UFOs, and we're going to talk about that, and of course, aliens. I am Cameron Brauer, and this is My Alien Life.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
My Alien Life is recorded live from atop the Northern Rocky Mountains and is available on Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes, and everywhere fine podcasts are found. My website is at www.myalienlifepodcast.com. There you will find my email address, all previously recorded shows, and more. I am Cameron Brauer. This is My Alien Life, and the podcast starts right now.
My Alien Life Podcast.
Three, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
In the studio tonight, I have Erica Lukes, and we're going to talk about government disclosure and, of course, talk about aliens. Erica, you are all over the internet. Your name appears almost as often as Amazon.com.
Oh, dear.
You're on YouTube and KCOR Radio, of course, the show UFO Classified. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for being here. I'm looking forward to tonight's show.
So I read a little bit about government disclosure and the two reports, one last week both coming out of New York. One, the Pentagon had finally uttered the words, they don't call them UFOs, they call them unidentified aerial phenomena for some reason. And then yesterday in the New York Times, we had Lieutenant Ryan Graves, who is a Super Hornet pilot, and he's been flying with the Navy for more than 10 years and reported sightings on the East Coast, Pentagon and Congress. So what do you think about these reports in New York and coming out of the East Coast? And do you think we're getting somewhat closer to a government disclosure of UFO activity?
Oh, Lord, that's the $1 million question. And I have to say that, there definitely seems to be a push. It is nice to see that some of these things are being taken more seriously, as they should have been 50 years ago. But unfortunately, due to some decisions that certain people inside of the United States government made, this subject was ridiculed and maligned, as were the researchers and people involved in it. And that still takes place to this day. But now, when you have the New York Times story that broke in December 2017 and the subsequent articles, that does give us a bit more validity, and so that's a good thing for somebody who, like myself, who takes this subject very, very seriously and thinks it's about time to get factual information out to the public.
What do you think it would mean if they were to admit that ETs were at least, possibly in our atmosphere? What would it change for us? What would that mean?
Oh, Lord. Well, and I've got to just state this, but for me, I don't necessarily want, and I don't look for a government to disclose that, because I think if they came out and said, this is what's taking place, there would be an agenda behind it. And there would be an objective. It's like, are we weaponizing? Are we creating a fear in the population? What are we doing? There's always, you look 50 years ago, they were manipulating the subject. Every government in the world has manipulated this subject. So I try to look outside of the United States government for good information. And it also helps to keep me sane.
I think you're right, because, if there was an admission, it'd be one or two things. One, they possibly do have another agenda. And two, the other side of that coin would be we need to get ready for something, whatever that might be. But I don't know. I just can't even think of, the UFO community, often thinks that there's a government agenda behind a lot of things, but I can't even imagine what that could possibly be. Has anybody thrown anything your way that kind of sticks?
Oh boy, and this is the thing, and it's been really interesting for me. Now I have one of the best archives in the Western United States, which is amazing, and it's open to the public. But I have work, periodicals, magazines, research from the late 40s on, and it has been very interesting for me to see how, from the get-go, this subject was manipulated by political and religious ideologies, and to just see how very subtly these types of things have shifted and shaped the narrative over the decades has been really quite something for me to see. And I'm not sure, I think people need to step back and kind of look at that a little closer, especially with some of the new, I think there are a lot of things going on right now. I think we need to be aware of that and definitely step away from, looking to this as I'm going to get in so much trouble. Let me say there is really important work, and it is based in fact. It is based in scientific research. None of it is coming from the United States of America. Well, maybe a little bit, but you're not going to hear too much about that. And we need to look to other places. And I always say this, but there is a Project Heston in Norway, 35 years of scientific research in a specific place. And they've identified 4 different types of light phenomena that behaves intelligently or as if it is intelligently controlled. And this is important, and this is what I try to encourage people to look at instead of looking at this ugly, sticky situation that the United States government has created for all of us, and then people in ufology just get in there and are not using their critical thinking skills and just make it more of an absolute joke than it should be, and that doesn't serve our greater good.
I think the status quo of the world possibly is not maybe non-belief and not purposeful, but it also could be maybe some disinterest, and it's easy to throw out some disinformation by the government to steer us in a different direction, and it's easy to get people to deny or shrug off the existence of extraterrestrials. Is that because we're just, as a human race, we're just not ready for disclosure?
I think we are. Oh, good Lord. I guess I should clarify that. I think that
I'm not, Eric.
Oh dear. Okay. Well, then we're going to seek therapy and drink margaritas and, get us little stuffed animals. I don't know what we're going to do, but it'll be group therapy time.
Yeah. I don't even know what that would look like if it happened, but I can honestly say that, things in my life would change, and everybody's life. I don't know how we could kind of normalize after such a shock. But then again, I mean, we've been through a lot as humans, and in the last 75 years, we've seen more happen than any other time in our existence. Of course, most of us were here, but it's just amazing to me to think that this could happen in the future. Do you have some sort of pivotal moment that grabbed you and started you in UFO research? What happened? What got you there?
Oh boy. I mean, I remember being a grade schooler and going to my school library and picking a book up off the shelf and seeing a UFO on the cover. And I just remember that moment. It will, forever just be burned into my mind. In fact, I found some paperwork that I'd done from grade school, and I drew the cover of that book for an English assignment. So I'm sure my teacher thought I was quite, special back then. But I had a series of interesting experiences as a child, and then in 2013, I was sitting on my porch that overlooked the Salt Lake Valley with a couple of friends of mine, and we saw objects that were not behaving like aircraft or any conventional objects. And we watched it, and then we watched two of them, and it was a very unusual experience. And so for me, back in 2013, even though I had had a lifelong interest, that really, to me, said, okay, what are you going to do about it? Because here you have something that is in the flight corridor for the Salt Lake International Airport. It is 80 miles away from Dugway Proving Ground. If this is, just identify it, learn what it is. If this is a threat, then we can figure that out. But it really piqued my interest, and then I began reaching out to Newfork, to MUFON, other researchers, and I became field investigator for MUFON in Utah, and then state director. I eventually resigned, but I knew that there were similar types of sightings that had taken place all over the world in specific areas, and this had been something that had been taking place for a long, long time. And I made up my mind that I was going to do what I could to create relationships with people who could mentor me and teach me about all of this, how to be an effective field researcher, and then also an archivist and historian. And then, I just felt strongly from there that I needed to speak publicly about it because we weren't getting good information. How was that for a long-winded answer?
That's a good answer. Well, here's what I'm wondering, because I'm just starting to meet people from Utah. I have this guy, his name is David Reese, and he follows me on Facebook, and he's always bringing up interesting things. What's happening in Utah? Why so much UFO activity in Utah?
Utah has always been such an intriguing place, and I think for me it became really intriguing when I took over as state director, because out of all of the states, Utah was one of those places, one of the states that there really weren't a lot of UFO reports that had been filed. And I found that very, very curious. And then I started looking into Elaine Douglas, who was the state director before I became state director. She passed away, unfortunately, and all of her work was that when it fell into the wrong hands, which is unfortunate for all of us here in Utah. But, I think you've got a lot of different things going on. You've got some of the most restricted airspace in the world here with the NSA. We've got Dugway Hill Air Force Base, the Utah Test and Training Range. And so we have got hundreds of thousands of acres dedicated to military testing. And we also have places like the Uinta Basin that is legendary for activity, UFOs, paranormal, strange creatures, Skinwalker Ranch, all of these things. And then, you've got places in the Salt Lake Valley. Utah Lake is a very interesting place as well. And there have been lots of sightings there. I've been researching one that I'll be talking about when I release all of the work I've been doing. But you've got some of the Blue Book cases, the Waldo Harris case. He was a pilot that had just taken off from a smaller airport here in Salt Lake, and He witnessed an object. He began pursuing it to fighter jets were scrambled from Hill Air Force Base, and there were also ground observers, and they could not identify what it was. And so there's so many great cases. It is an important place, but it's been very difficult to find information about it. And I have to think at the end of the day, it's because that information has been scrubbed, I would think.
How long ago was Waldo Harris?
Oh, Waldo Harris was back in the 60s.
So yeah,
long,
it's one of the things I've heard of. I know very little about it, but what about Skinwalker Ranch? I know that I've read a little bit about you and Skinwalker Ranch. What intrigues you about that ranch?
Well, there's so much to be intrigued about. That ranch it spans 480 acres. It is very beautiful, very pristine, but back in the day, back when the Shermans owned it, there was a family that came in, and they were great people, had a wonderful reputation around in that small community in Roosevelt and surrounding areas, and they experienced things that were very traumatic. And I'm sure most of us in this subject or in the world know the history of all of this, but their story was written about by Zach Van Eyck, who was a Deseret news reporter. That story was huge. And then Robert Bigelow, an aerospace engineer, businessman, bought the property with funding from the Pentagon and sent some of the best scientists in the world there to do research. It is, I have been there. I have been on the periphery as well and have experienced some pretty unusual things that I still can't wrap my head around. And I don't know what it is. I don't know whether this is, I hate to even go out as far as to say that this is a portal. I don't know what it is. I think that whole area, the Uinta Basin, is very unusual. And if you reach out and talk to people in the community, you will get stories that span back decades. Junior Hicks, who has been a remarkable resource and just a great, a shining example of what is right in researching things. But he started researching different sightings, very incredible sightings from the 1960s on in the Uinta Basin. He wrote a book called The Utah UFO Display with Dr. Frank Salisbury, who was a botanist here in Utah, and that has a lot of really incredible case reports that took place around the ranch. And we're talking about UFOs landing on the road and in front of a school bus, entities getting out in front of the children.
Wow.
Many different things that are of note. And it has been interesting to watch Junior, because he's collected decade after decade after decade over 700 reports. And I had the pleasure to go up there a few months ago and just sit down and talk with him. And that was a really meaningful experience to me, not only to be able to give him thanks as on behalf of people who research and care about this subject for the large body that he's contributed, but just to look in his eyes and see how, after 90 years, how this has impacted him, and how he's a very religious man. Both he and Dr. Frank Salisbury were in our LDS. And so it was a trying thing for them personally and spiritually.
So as far as Utah ranches go, it's not huge. And when you consider all that has happened there, it's a small site that's very significant. There's a website, skinwalker.org, and it has an interesting page to me, and it lists phenomenon seen there on the ranch, and it's sorted by the likelihood of what paranormal event you'll see if you're there. For example, you have a 25% chance of seeing a flash drone, what they call it, or some kind of bright white orb. Is the ranch still active right now like that?
Absolutely.
Really?
absolutely.
Because I don't know if you've seen this, it's totally amazing. Like the first thing on there, they call it the spotlight, which you have the most likely you are to see that event, and they say you have a 46% chance of seeing that, and
Wow.
the flash drone a 25% chance, and a invisible chopper 5.8. I mean, these are somebody obviously took the time to post this, and it's a pretty neat website, but how, are there people actively going there and researching that area today? Is it a place where some people come to Utah and basically to seek it out and to research?
You know what? There will always be people from all over the world that come there. And when I was there a few months ago, it was quite sad to me to see on the periphery of the property. I mean, there were beer bottles. Somebody left a pair of pants. I don't want to know about that. But I mean, there was a lot of, there were definitely signs that humans had gone there and they hadn't been respectful to this area, which is sad. And then you get reports of people that are breaking on to the property and unnerving the people that are there. I get the fact that this is the world's most famous, paranormal property, but it also, is a private property. It's owned by Adamantium. Now they bought that from Robert Bigelow and are doing private research. But there are, I think, some pretty significant, it's trespassing. You're trespassing onto property where if you walk onto that property and something happens, it's who's liable for that? There are people. I had a few months back, I had Dr. Eric Davis, who obviously had been out there and had seen a creature coming out of a portal on the property. He was working for Bigelow at the time. And, there are, on the show, we talked about some of the medical injuries that have been reported at the ranch. So this isn't one of those places where it's all fun and games, and I don't think people realize that, and they need to realize that this is very, very real, and we need to take that into consideration and be respectful of property. But yes, it is very much active. Like I said a few months ago when I was there, I have no idea what it was that I saw, but it was pretty. I still can't put together the words. So it had an impact on me.
Was it at night? Was it at night?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you're not going to tell us what you saw.
Well, I've got, I just need to process this. And when I talk about it, really, really, really talk about it, I want to have all my ducks in a row. And it was just one of those experiences. It was just so personal, and I still am at a loss really to find words to describe it, but it's one of those things.
So you were a state director for the Utah chapter of MUFON and a field investigator. How much work goes into that? How much work goes into field investigation, and what's expected out of you when you wear that hat for MUFON?
For me, I had a unique challenge because I was coming into a chapter that had been fractured, and that it was really virtually non-existent. It was being run by Max Mitchell, who was out of Tennessee. So he was the state director, and then briefly they appointed another person, and it's you realize that this is a big job, that you are investing your own money, that you are taking time away from loved ones and family, and you're going out on a limb to put yourself out there as somebody who investigates UFOs and all these things. And so for me, that was a big task to try to get people engaged again and to join, which I did. And I got the chapter built back up and had some incredible meetings with people, Merrill Cook, who was Congressman Merrill Cook. He spoke several times. Dave Rosenfeld, Alien Dave, and it was a great resource. and I also, above and beyond getting the chapter up and running, investigating two of the best cases, actually, that we've had in the past 10 years. I will just go out on the record and say that. But I also worked underneath Jan Harzan at MUFON headquarters as an associate producer for the communications department, and was trying to do some good things there. And so I put more time into it than a full-time job. And of course, you get no money to do that, and not a lot of respect. So that taught me a lot of lessons about how I want to move forward with this subject.
So if you had a case that you were to be investigating with MUFON, how would you normally get that case? Do they hand you a case file and say, go investigate? How does that work?
So they have a central management system, a case management system. So it's the database, and sightings reports go into that CMS, and then you get, the case will come to you as a state director, and you can assign it out to who you want to, or maybe the case never gets to you. That was always one of those big questions with MUFON. Where did the cases go? All the good ones. But the good cases that I investigated, the winners, American Airlines 434 is probably one of the best radar cases that we have ever had. And that is not just me saying this. This is some important people. That case I put in there. I found it, and this was one of my babies. And then also the October 2nd, 2014 mass daytime sighting, which was another really important case that probably nobody's ever heard about. So, I mean, those are cases that I went out and found.
So one of the things I've noticed that, for example, in Montana, people seem to ignore things that were prominent 30 years ago. Cattle mutilations. I don't know. You could go on literally any ranch in northern Montana, and after some looking, you can find a dead cow that has some telltale signs of things that you can't explain. Or is that still happening in Utah? Is on ranches around Utah, are we still getting cattle mutilation reports?
Yes, we are. In fact, the October 2nd, 2014 sighting, it was really interesting because I had around that same time frame a fellow who was a police officer contact me and give me information from another police department about cattle mutilations, a string of them, and it was very interesting to see those reports. I reached out to people, in hopes that I could set up some communication with them, but they were non-responsive, which is unfortunate. But yes, they're still going on, and people just don't know where to report them to. That's a huge loss for somebody with livestock, and it's also kind of a black mark on you. People won't get involved with this. I did hear some rumblings that the university, Utah State University, was investigating all of the cattle mutilations, and they've been taking the bodies there for some time to do research, but nothing solid ever came out about that. Shocking.
One of the reasons I bring it up is because, it's one of those things that has happened so much in Montana, and I know it's happened all over, but, I actually don't think that people in Montana do much about that anymore. I think they just see it happening, ignore it, leave the cow where it lays, and let the predators of the prairie pick it up and take it away. So,
right.
I was just kind of wondering if that was still even a thing anymore. I do hear about it, but not like I used to.
No, it was quite the rage. It was very important, as you know, a couple decades ago. But it was, I think it's like UFOs. It's like, where do you go? Who do you report this to?
Right.
And what's going to happen at the end of the day? And when you're trying to earn a living, and you suffer a loss like that, you move on. What do you do? I mean, there's so many barriers that we have. It's like being a commercial or military airline or, a pilot and not knowing where to go to get this information out there or to report it. And I want to just throw in a little plug for my colleague and friend Ted Rowe, who's the executive director of NARCAP. And they have done for the past couple decades the most important work about commercial and military pilot sightings, and have some of the best research papers that I have ever read. And so, but it's a struggle. It's a struggle for people to come forward. At the end of the day, where does this information go? At the end of the day, how supported are we? I don't know. I hope things will change and quickly.
Who have you interviewed, or what investigation have you been a part of that has completely blown you away?
Oh, Lordy. I think for me, one of the most profound things was when I went to Norway, and I was with Dr. Erling Strand, who is one of the leads at Project Heshtalen, which is the world's most important study of anomalous light phenomena. And I had a lot of conversations with him. And as a scientist, and really he has broken a lot of ground for all of us to ask him, why did you do this? And he said that they felt that there were people that were experiencing things, and that science had a duty to address this. And the media shunned the people in this little teeny village. And he said that's not what we're supposed to be about. And so he got a team together. And 35 years later, they've contributed more to this topic than anyone I know. And it's really important. And so to sit there and to see the genuine love of this subject, and wonder and awe and intensity, it was one of the most pivotal moments I've ever had in my life. And it was inspiring, and I wish that we all could feel that way. I have another kind of mind-blowing thing. I've got a family here in the Uinta Basin that I have been researching for years, and have been chronicling all of their experiences and things. And I went up about 5-6 years ago to the Uinta Basin and interviewed the mother and the grandmother. And the mother was in her late 80s at the time, and she spoke about a lifetime full of sightings, and having times where she was in a remote trailer with her husband and her nephew, and all of a sudden they see a light above the trailer, hear a strange noise, and the next thing they can remember, there is moldy bread and milk on the cupboard.
Wow.
And things. And so, it's like, and then her talking about being healed. It's just, and I'm so grateful that I have a great cameraman and friend. We went in there and documented this. She's since passed away, but I am in contact and still interview her grandson and her daughter. And things. This is really important to chronicle and to have this history for people. It's just been really it's just been an amazing experience, and it's so wonderful that people trust you.
Yeah, I think the deeper you get into it, the more people that actually find their way to you. I mean, I imagine you're at the point right now in your career where you don't even have to look for people anymore. They come and find you.
Yes, I do. Sometimes that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. No, it is. I just, even in my business, since that's where I have my archive, I will invite people back that, come into my business to hear, it has nothing to do with UFOs, but I'll bring them back there and say, look at this cool archive. And it has been shocking to me to hear that most of them have a story, and most of them are absolutely, mind blowing. And gosh, last week I was teaching a new person, and that person said that they were very close to the Shermans up at Skinwalker Ranch, and it was like, what? And so you get all of these strange things that happen, but it's a trip, and I love it. And as you know, when you reach out and you start talking to people, most people have had some type of experience, whether you want to label it paranormal or UFOs or however we want to label that, people have had experiences. This is nothing new.
No, not at all. Who do you like and respect in American ufology the most right now?
I respect, and my mentor is Barry Greenwood, and Barry Greenwood wrote the most important book on the subject back in the 80s with his co-author Larry Fawcett. The book is called Clear Intent, and they did a tremendous amount of work FOIA-ing information about what the government knew and getting these documents to paint a picture that, yes, the government was very well aware of the subject. He is also the world's foremost archivist and historian, and he has been working with me to learn how to preserve the history of the subject. And also, we've been working together to get different collections from researchers to Salt Lake, so I can have that to educate the public. And so for me, he's the most important person in the subject. His knowledge is just unbelievable. I think Fran Ridge is amazing from NICAP, Jan Aldrich, Project 1947. These are people, the majority of them, that you don't really hear a lot about because they've learned that ufology is not the place they want to really spend their time. They're actually doing the hard work instead of socializing. And so those are the people that I gravitate towards. And I'm sure and Greg Bishop, I have a lot of respect for Greg Bishop.
Where do you want to be 5 years from now?
Oh, on a tropical island. I don't know.
Me too. But if we let's pretend we have to work in 5 years.
In 5 years, I want to be in Norway. I want to continue to go back there. I want to continue to get out and do field research. So I want to be everywhere. I want the ability to travel and to break ground and to learn and to explore the world and everything around us. And I hope that I can make a difference, because I really think this is the most important topic I will ever have to deal with. And it is of critical importance. Obviously, it is, or we wouldn't have seen so much deliberate deception by the powers that be. And so I hope in some regard that I can help give people good knowledge and make a change.
How do you research something as a believer and then separate those moments where you become a skeptic because of a case that's not believable or it's unbelievable?
You know what? I think, like some researchers, when I first got into this, especially back in, when I was reading Bud Hopkins, Whitley Strieber, some of these things way back when, I mean, you have a tendency to go down these rabbit holes. And I have learned rather quickly now that you have to have always one foot on the ground and then look at some of these things and then step back and look at the bigger picture and look at the people that are pulling the strings and all of these things. And so, I don't know. It's just a difficult thing.
I mean, when you're out there, I feel that you wouldn't want to actually say to somebody, you're wasting my time, but they're wasting your time. And it could be, maybe they did have a real account, but they're not conveying that to you very well. Or, there are people out there who have nefarious reasons for wanting to be known as somebody who saw a UFO. I just can't imagine being out there in the field and having to tell somebody. I mean, where do you even start?
You know what? I always just start by listening. because I would dare say that a majority of the people that approach me are doing it from a genuine place, whether they've misidentified an object, and you can empower them to learn about how to identify things, or whether they've had something that is truly profound, or whether they might need help. I mean, there's so many different things at play, but it's been so rewarding just to go to different places and to sit and talk with people and to listen and not judge, just listen and take it in. And that's a really powerful thing.
Don't you find it amazing when you meet somebody for the first time and you actually tell them what you do, that it seems like almost everybody has a story? I mean, that's got to tell you something.
They do, and I love it. And I love the fact that you can watch people just look at life a little differently. It's not, I mean, most of us, we go to work, or we wake up in the morning, we go to work, we have lunch, we come home, we go to soccer practice, or we do all of these things, and that's wonderful and it's important. But, sometimes you have to step back and say, God, there is so much around us right here, right now. There's so many beautiful things that we could explore, and life isn't simply a black and white thing. And for me, that's been that's something that I treasure.
A lot of times when I talk to somebody or interview them, I have my own opinions, and they're very, very firm. However, I do hear stories that I find interesting enough to consider that later on. But, the events that had happened to me really, really gave me a firm foundation of where I think these beings came from, what they're doing here, where they are right now. For you, who are the aliens? What are the aliens?
For me, I don't know. For me, that it is whatever this is, which is, like I've said, I think it's more than just a single thing. It's something that has the capacity and does interact with us and respond and shares the world around us. I don't know whether it's extraterrestrial, interdimensional, ultra-terrestrial. I have no idea. I don't think any of us do. And I have to wonder why specifically the extraterrestrial hypothesis was thrown out there. Was there a political motivation behind that? I don't know. But there's no doubt for me. And when you look at science and some of the research that has been done, that there is something around us, and it is interacting with us. So it's, whatever you take away from that, and you can always find those people that will poo-poo it and nothing will ever be enough for them. And honestly, the older I get, the more I research this, I just think, well, that's your problem. If you can't look at facts, that's kind of a sad way to be.
I think one of the things that I think about often is I don't have the chance to talk to as many people as you do. When you talk to these people, do you get a sense of, maybe you don't know what these aliens are, but any idea of what an alien would want here on Earth or above Earth?
I don't. I think for me, I mean, I've never, in my experiences, I've never had anything that I felt was threatening or negative, but I have interviewed and I know people that have had experiences that were incredibly traumatic to them. And so I don't know, at the end of the day, is this just a matter of our own perception? I don't know, but there is definitely something. I don't know. This is, and I'm sorry to lose my words, but it's just this. It gets so deep. And where do you go? And how do you know how to address this?
Any other unexplained phenomenon you'd like to research?
I love researching, and I think with some of these specific places, like Norway, like Skinwalker Ranch, the Yakima Indian Reservation, Missouri, there are specific types of phenomena that you'll see. And I think there's a phenomena, the cookie cutters, where there are large chunks of ground, of earth, that are basically scooped up and then they're displaced a ways away with all of the branches or the roots intact in these clumps of dirt. And this has been a remarkable thing to start to gather information about that. And then also the underground noises, again, which is one of those things that you'll hear about or read about in different places where they're having recurrent sightings. So I think all of that goes together. And I love, it's fun. It's like, this is the biggest, most trippy puzzle I will ever have to try to put together. And it's just what you think you learned something or you're onto something, and then there's another door that opens up.
Yeah, it's huge. And I think one of the more interesting things that I found is, like in my early podcasts, I shared some of my own accounts, and then somebody texts me and over this really odd thing that I had said, and they had experienced the same thing, which totally, blows my mind. It really makes my heart beat. It takes me back there. It's not a particularly happy place that it puts me in, but it's one of those things that make me say, wow. And it really hits home, and it really makes me feel, takes me back to that place where I experienced that. One of the things that came to my mind when I was reading those stories earlier that were in the New York Post and the Times about the UFOs that were spotted and all the documentation and the film footage they have. To me, it looked like, I keep hearing people calling it a tic tac. And they also saw a tic tac in 2004 off the west coast of several places in South America that was also filmed by radar and filmed by Navy pilots over there. That one of the things that I got to see this afternoon was video footage from a Hornet, and the Navy pilot was pursuing it. And it was flying over the water off the East Coast somewhere of the United States, and I'm not sure where, but unbelievably fast, And I remember as a kid, and I've had this on podcasts before, where I'm looking up in the sky, and my friends and I are seeing, what we asked people about this. Oh, those were just satellites. Well, back when I was a kid, there weren't a lot of satellites. There were lots of them, but not compared to what they are now. And we would see these objects in the sky, make these crazy maneuvers, and we knew that they weren't satellites. And it looked very much like what I saw this afternoon online that was traveling over the Atlantic Ocean. Do you know, this is a question that's taken me a long time to get there. Do you know of anybody who is doing an aerial or a survey of the sky research? Because I keep telling people, I said, if you want to see a UFO, you go to Montana, right up by the Canadian border, central Montana, look up in the sky for 3 days, and you're going to see stuff up there that you'll never be able to explain.
I don't. And I think except for places like Norway, that have, the cool thing about Project Echelon is they've got instrumentation stations, and they're collecting, and they've got a live streaming video in different locations over there. So they're constantly collecting things. I think Christopher O'Brien is working on getting instrumentation so he can constantly collect data in the San Luis Valley, which is important. And so it's stuff like this that I believe will truly make a difference. But we need to be able to get instrumentation, and we need to be able to get it out there to places and start collecting data, and then we need to not have day jobs.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't get paid well for this, so it would be...
Or at all, yeah.
Yeah. So any common denominators, geographical or otherwise, that you've come up with over your research years that would help you to predict where people are going to see UFOs in the United States.
Oh boy. You could look at people make the correlations that there are bodies of water. Excuse my little dog, it's getting super spicy over here. Bodies of water, military installations, Native American sites. There are reasons to believe that these objects are attracted to specific mineral and rare earth. Rare earth, and so I think that there are all sorts of things that should be looked at, and I would like to do that. I was trying to do that when I was working for MUFON. I was with Robert Spearing and Terry Ray, and we were trying to get a cohesive group together to analyze the database and try to figure out what some of the commonalities were. Cheryl Costa and her partner Linda have just come up with a great desk reference, and they've done a lot of statistical analysis to identify different sightings areas, clusters. Tom Conwell has also done some great things with regard to that, and they have ideas on what some of the commonalities are. So those are good places to look, good resources.
I was looking on the MUFON site, and probably in the last few weeks more often than I ever have, and I noticed that when people have a sighting, they'll pin that sighting on a map, and that's my favorite part about the whole site is the map. But it leaves me wondering why people are waiting so long to make a report. I mean, I'm looking and seeing like a report from yesterday that was, they're reporting something that happened in 1996. I'm sure it was significant then, but why are they waiting?
Oh, I think everybody does things in their own time. I think it's very confusing now, especially, where do you go to report a UFO sighting? I would recommend going to New Fork. To be honest with you, I would not report a sighting to MUFON because MUFON is not sharing their data. You have to be a member. You have to jump through this hoop or that hoop, and you don't get a big picture of that. And I think that for a nonprofit whose whole goal is to educate humanity, that's not educating humanity by hiding information. So I love that about New Fork. You can get on there, report it. It's made available to the public. That's important. So it's hard. Where do you go? I think now, unfortunately, we're seeing people turn to different Facebook groups, different social media groups, and that in their mind is a way of reporting it when it actually really isn't.
No, it's not.
So
I think it hits it hits Facebook, and we're loving our life online of 30-minute sound bites and whatever, and we kind of forget about it really quick. But
exactly, and I have to just throw this out there that
Sure.
People don't understand that these Facebook groups and different social media groups are being set up and manipulated to gather intelligence, to gather so people need to be mindful of that. And I think the best thing that I can encourage people to do, and this is what I've done, is I've journaled my whole life. I've journaled all of these things, and I've like I said, please report things to New Fork. That's important so we can get information. But it's a tough thing.
Let me ask you this: how should we be sharing data worldwide or nationwide? What would you like to see, and how would you like to see that done?
How could we share that? I think that's a great question, because there's so much that needs to be shared. Unfortunately, we've got an issue here where case reports are not being shared. You look at MUFON, and it's kind of holding people hostage to subscribing, and even then, like I said, you don't have access to that. So I definitely think the board of directors and leadership should be questioned a little bit more about why data isn't a little more accessible. And then we also have some of the historical research that is now in the process of being either thrown in the garbage or being donated to countries overseas, and then that data from researchers for decades, that data is now getting squashed down into a little teeny black hole where nobody will ever have access to it, and where right now with the media the way it is, the whole narrative will be changed and the whole history will be rewritten. And that is incredibly disturbing to me. And so those are two big issues with regard to this. How can we share that data? I don't know, but we're going to have to figure something out really quickly, and we're going to have to hold organizations accountable for not doing so, and really shine a spotlight on those who are hoarding data. You know, there are lots of researchers, especially here in the United States. It's like, it's mine, it's mine, it's mine. I'm never going to share it with anybody. And, well, great, good for you. That'll help us learn.
I like how when we first started, you were talking about going to the library as a little kid and finding books on UFOs. It was the same way with me. I know that you probably had, don't know who that was, but you had this bookseller that came to your library in your local elementary school maybe once or twice a year, and they always had these great books, and you would go home and tell mom or dad you needed money for the next day, and you would go to school and buy books. And of course there was very few UFO books back then, and even in my day, which is, I'm a little older than you, but there was Chariots of the Gods, which was the one that I had purchased and loved and read it cover to cover many times. But there were other books. There was books on Sasquatch and Yeti. And one of the things that I see, and especially because of social media, Facebook is probably a big reason, that I think these research waters are getting muddied because we're finding so much crossover between the two. People are bringing up these questions. Somebody has a legitimate aerial observation of some sort of phenomenon, lights, whatever. They're in the woods, well, was there a Bigfoot nearby? Was this nearby? I mean, there's so much of this stuff crossing over, and we're even seeing religion as part of the equation. I mean, how does that hinder an investigation that you're part of?
Well, I mean, it's introducing bias. I mean, and that's the thing that's
There's an incredible amount of bias there.
Oh, good Lord. I mean, it's good Lord. That,
literally.
But that is, it's wrong. I mean, this should, like I've said, I mean, this should be, we should step back and be objective and look at the data. And when you've got people and religious factions and ideas and all of these things, political, as we know, and I think in ufology, I mean, we've got some pretty extreme viewpoints. And for me, my political agenda should have nothing to freaking do with the study and the research of the UFO phenomenon. Keep it out.
Right.
So I don't understand why people need to bring in, this is demonic, and let's go back to the Book of Enoch, and okay, that's great, thank you, but let's step aside and not put our beliefs on this.
I can't even imagine. It must make the work, a difficult job, so much more difficult when you have to wade through that. I think one of the things that I see a lot of too now is that people are talking about the Anunnaki, and I don't talk about that very much, but I will listen. You live in a part of the world where you had from where you are right now and south, you had the Hopi, you had the Anasazi. What accounts are there researchers still in the Southwest and in Utah that are researching Indian tribes of long ago that are making a UFO connection?
Ron Regehr and Chris O'Brien and Clifford Mahooty. I mean, they're great friends, and they've gone and done a lot of research with regard to that. I went to the place that was a Hohokam site in southern Arizona. I went with Ted Rowe, the executive director of NARCAP, and we did extensive research there. And so there are people that are doing that and getting out there and conducting field research projects. I was also very fortunate when I was a few years ago when I first got into this. I became friends with somebody who was one of the world's leading Native American historians, and he was up at the University of Utah, and that was really something to be able to learn from him and to get information, and it's just a never, like I said, it's never ending journey. I mean, I have learned, even though I was trying to go into UFOs, I've learned about geology. I've learned about the aerospace industry and learned about politics and people, which has been the most disturbing aspect of all. And all of all of these things, and it's been I have my education has just been incredible, and I am grateful for that opportunity to learn so much about the world.
Sociologically speaking and anthropologically speaking, when you study humans, you have to take a very, very multidisciplinary approach. Well, aliens are some sort of beings, and obviously you're finding it multidisciplinary. From what fields and who do you work for, or who is your go-to scientist out there that if you have questions in the field?
You know what? I have different people for different things. There's an astrophysicist, Dr. Massimo Teodorani from Italy, who wrote The Hyperspace of Consciousness, and he has been incredible. He has also gone to these different active locations all over the world, like Norway. You can go to projecthestalin.org and look at the papers that he has helped write with the other people involved in that project. Very incredible. I've had him analyze different photos for me, and I've bounced ideas off of him and learned a great deal. I looked to Dr. Erling Strand, who's a great resource, and then people in the United States, Barry Greenwood, Jen Aldrich. I mean, there's so many, they're just great resources, but these resources are oftentimes like hidden. They're not going to make themselves available readily. You have to do your research and establish relationships and then reach out to them, but they're there.
So when you knock on their door and say, "Hey, I'm a UFO researcher," they just don't open it right up and let you in?
Well,
which would be nice.
I think that, it's taken me a long, long time to establish trust and to let people know that I care very deeply about this subject, and I'm not an idiot, and I'm not going to betray any confidence, trust, and that I want to represent this subject the best way that I can publicly. And so I'll never forget, I had a moment when I was over in Norway, and we were just sitting at a nice quiet table, and I was with a couple Italian scientists, a French, and then a Greek scientist, and then a Norwegian scientist, and then it was me. And I'm just thinking to myself, well, I'm really lucky. This is quite exciting, but I was right there with it. It was really interesting for me to see the way the Italians dealt with me and were so open, and then to see the way, I had one specific person in that group say to me, "What do you think you're doing here? What contribution do you think you can make?"
Wow.
Yeah. And I got it, I got it because a lot of the people in ufology wouldn't respect that. You know what I mean? So, I totally could understand that, but I also was just like, God, I could do a lot, and I will. And if it wasn't for people like us, that took an interest in it, you might not get funding.
So let me ask you this now. This is the tough question of the night. Do you own a yellow 1965 Ford Galaxy 500 convertible? Is that yours?
How did you know that? Isn't that the coolest freaking car?
I used to have a 1966 Ford Custom 500. It was white, though. And I used to drive that in high school, and it was amazing.
Sweet. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy that you You're drawing attention to my baby because
That is your car.
It is my car.
Wow.
And she is naughty. I just got her out of the shop, and I love her. Her top doesn't work. I don't know why I call it a her, but that's the way it rolls. But she has a 390, and my car has leopard interior, which is just crazy. But it's one of those cars you get into, and it just makes you so happy.
Yeah, that was my car. That was the car that I used to, one of the two cars that I used to have in high school, roaring down the highway in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night, spotting UFOs. And so I had a 66 Ford Custom 500, and I had an old Chevy that, back where I grew up, there were every farmer had cars out in the backfield, and it didn't take too much money to get one of those cars and bring it home. I wish I had both of those today. You're lucky.
I am so lucky, and I've had friends over the years. I've owned that car for 20 years, and I've had so many people say, sell it, and I can't, it's my little pride and joy. And
it's the spice of life. So
it is the spice of life.
This summer, what do you have going on? Are you taking in any conventions? Are you just vacation mode? What's happening? Anything good?
Yes, actually, in a week, I will be heading to LA to meet I'm writing a book, and my co-author, Gordon Lohr, who used to work
cool.
With NICAP back in the 60s, really important guy. He's written several books that I list on my website. He's a very important man. I'm so happy to get to know him. He's 83 now, and so I'm going to go out and work on the book with him. And then I'm also meeting Jan Aldrich, who I mentioned earlier, who has Project 1947, a wonderful archivist, and then Tom Tulane, who has contributed a great deal and has gone all over the world to record oral histories with some of the best researchers on the planet, including Junior Hicks here in Utah. So that's what I get to do in a week. I get to hang out with those boys, and see how much trouble we can cause and how we can, try to change the world. But that's my big plan. And then the Utah UFO Festival in 2 weeks, I'll be speaking, and that's all I can get my mind around for June.
And then tell everybody where they can listen to you on KCOR.
So on KCOR, my show is UFO Classified. It's on Friday nights at 7 p.m. And you can also find me. I have a YouTube channel that I've got a great listener who's helping me get the videos out there. And then you can go to UFOclassified.com or ericalukes.com. I'm trying to get up a button, update these websites, and add some different things. And it's just, I love it. And then also on Thursday nights, NASA's Unexplained Files on the Science Channel. And then in July on the Travel Channel, UFOs documenting, or The Lost Evidence will be on. And that's the second season of that show. So you can look for me there as well.
Very cool. Thank you, Erica, so much for being on the podcast.
So much fun. I'm going to have to get you back on mine. So
I would love to. I would love to. Thank you very much. Have a great summer, okay?
Thank you, too. Take care.
My Alien Life Podcast.
You can find my website at www.myalienlifepodcast.com, and please subscribe to my latest downloads at iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and at podbean.com. And please follow me and like me on Facebook and Twitter. My Alien Life is written and produced for broadcast at Studio 254 in the Northern Rocky Mountains. The music you are hearing is produced and created by Elion. You can find all Elion's work online at Heart Dance Records.